Sister Loretta was a member of a modest order of devotees to Saint Dionysia, who was scourged and subsequently martyred by a barbarian king in the 5th century. Dionysia had spent her 16 summers in Lampsakos, along the southern coast of the Sea of Marmara. There, she was witness to the trial and torture of 3 Christians, Nicomachus, Peter, and Andrew. While subjected to dehumanizing and cruel public tortures, Nicomachus recanted his faith, publicly denying Christ, while Peter and Andrew continued to endure the pain, refusing to turn their backs on the Lord. Overcome with admiration and love for the 2 tortured men, and disdain for Nicomachus, Dionysia called him a coward, and was arrested. She was then assaulted and tortured, escaping only due to what witnesses claim was angelic intervention. Rather than run for her life, she instead went to the square where Peter and Andrew had died, loudly proclaiming her faith and love for Christ, and demanding to be martyred alongside the 2 faithful men. In a final petty act, her tormentors brought her to a different site, where they killed her with the swift stroke of a sword, denying her both her display of faith and strength of spirit, and her final wish. Granted sainthood for her incredible bravery, Dionysia would rise to prominence in small pockets of Christendom in the years just after the opening of the gates of hell. Her incredible bravery and refusal to allow suffering to steer her from the path of righteousness became a lightning rod for members of the faithful who feared the coming war. The Sisters of Saint Dionysia maintained a tiny hospice within the sanctuary of the Immaculate Heart in Amberecia, in southern Nubia. The remote sanctuary had remained untouched by war for decades, even when the legions of Mammon ravaged to the south and west after the sack of Crusade. In December, beginning 3 days after St. Dionysius' holy day, the night showed the sullen red of settlements being put to the torch, and thereafter, each morning, the columns of smoke crept closer and closer. The injured and the refugees fleeing to the sanctuary grew from a trickle into a flood. Bitter, defeated soldiers, terrified peasants, dust-streaked hungry children, each day brought more, and the sisters turned no one away. Everyone who came to St. Dionysia for aid would receive what they could, even if it was little more than the bravery to face what was coming with strength and faith in Christ. Sister Loretta and her order took in everyone, and gave them what food and water they had, never thinking to keep anything back for themselves. As the surrounding regions emptied, stripped bare by the followers of Mammon, food, medicine and water became barely sufficient. Supplies were rationed, and then the rations were cut again and again. As bellies emptied and the sick multiplied, men became desperate, and inevitably, despite the sisters' protestations, harsh penalties were enacted upon thieves and looters, both real and imagined. Brutal discipline, devout prayer, and sheer desperation kept the sanctuary functioning across months of deprivation and torment, each day a dull, keening knife of despair. Finally, the Legion of the Fifth Golden Horn took note, and closed in with the confident certainty of a hunter checking their traps. Even cornered, the people of the sanctuary knew that surrender to the Prince of Greed's brazen demands would offer no peace. They could not turn from their faith, nor would they be driven to by earthly suffering. Without supplies, driven almost to madness by fear, the spirit of Saint Dionysia reached out to them and offered them strength beyond imagining. They chose to resist, accepting the finality of the grave and the thin prayer of hope that someone or something would come to their aid. Inspired by the patron of the walls that offered even meagre protections, they refused to turn their backs on God. Laughing at such temerity, the Golden Legion laid siege in unhurried fashion, while awaiting their mortal followers. Hunger would do their work, aided by the slobbering belch of mortar and cannon, as they rained shells down upon their hapless prey. The Order of Saint Dionysia was not known for riches, so the Horde of Mammon eschewed their usual favour for gas attacks, and instead opted for explosives, preferring to hold their gas munitions for the inevitable assaults they had planned on richer cities in the weeks that followed. More days and nights of torment and sacrifice came, with no hope in sight as the walls of the sanctuary were slowly and sadistically broken down around them. All of the sisters perished one by one, until only Sister Loretta was left, and 9/10 of the people trapped inside the sanctuary died before the first assault. And finally, on the 7th day, strident horns sounded in the Legion camp. But it was not to unleash the long-anticipated assault. Instead, it was a call to arms. Another war host glittered on the horizon, and battle erupted in the besiegers' rear. But as the new force came closer, it became clear that here was the deathless soldiers of the Black Grail. The constant battle for dominance between Beelzebub and Mammon had once again extended beyond the boundaries of hell, and seeing weakness in Mammon's obsession with a meaningless sanctuary that should have quickly fallen, Beelzebub sought to deliver a killing blow to his rival's machinations on the continent of Africa. The two forces, the damned and the dead, struggled like giants beside an anthill, and no one can say who was the victor. The gleam of gold and the grime of rot and decay clashed against each other like alien seas upon the plains, and the denizens of hell died by the dozen to continue the enmity of their masters. The sanctuary was overrun in the fighting and left in ruins. Its defenders died to a man and a woman. The sick and the injured were slain in their cots. No refugees had managed to escape the trap. And the final sister, the last of her order, the one who suffered and witnessed and prayed and fought as everything she had ever known or cared about was relentlessly ground down into dust and despair, well, she lived, after a fashion. Or at least she didn't perish in the rubble. Perhaps the Grail bestowed a gift upon her, or perhaps her apotheosis was truly divine. Whatever the truth, our sister Loretta did not die that day. Our Lady of Penitence, she rose again.